No, I don't believe in God. I've read the Bible too many times for that. But if you believe the Bible is the word of God, then everything that's ever happened on this earth is... Oh, the devil just was under my chair. The first author says that God told him he invented everything on earth knowing exactly how it would be used, so he wanted it to happen. You can't say it's unfortunate when he makes no mistakes. He invented Adam and Eve and the apple and the tree and the snake, knowing that she would eat that apple and create suffering, and he chose to make the tree anyway. So he wanted it to happen. This idea of free will is a complete contradiction, and the author is not being consistent with what they're allegedly hearing. And there's 40 different authors in the Bible. It's written over 1,500 years, which is why it's constantly contradicting itself. A lot of these authors weren't able to verify that the stories they were saying they were hearing from God was the same as the other authors. And after 100 years or 500 years of people going, I don't really believe in this anymore because this part doesn't make sense, people were like, shit, I'm gonna write a story that would make that make sense. And every time people point out this doesn't make sense, I'll be like, no, but this part explains it 500 years later. Which is why people's morals ended up just being a contradiction. So you can have people like this who will say something as evil as, I love an entity that believes innocent children should be tortured and punished for other people's behavior. And then simultaneously say, I'm a good person with good morals. No, you're not. You can't have it both ways. That's a complete contradiction, which is, again, why you have people in churches and priests way more likely to abuse children, because your understanding of what's right and wrong is intended to contradict itself. Well, imagine me in elementary school being taught that, God decides everyone that's going to be born and he knows what they're going to do before they're born, meaning he decides that people will be serial killers. And then I'm taught that the 10 Commandments say that God doesn't want you killing anybody. And I'm like, excuse me, teacher. Which is it? It can't be both. The story makes no sense. And then they're like, okay, well, Jessica, here's a bunch more examples of times God said you shouldn't kill anyone. And I'm like, oh, so the contradiction's way worse than I thought. Because now I can find a whole bunch of examples of times God told people to kill people. So all you've proven to me is that this story is way less legitimate than my initial concern. I realize now it's not that I'm smarter than every teacher I ever had. It's just that I'm autistic. So I see patterns and when they're not adding up. And other people also see when these things don't add up. But you can soothe their discomfort by just going like this. And they're like, now everything adds up. Bitch, this still doesn't fucking add up. It doesn't matter how much other shit you bring to the table. This doesn't fucking add up. Hello? And anytime I talk about this online, obviously religious people get very upset because they can feel that what I'm saying makes sense and what they believe doesn't. That's called cognitive dissonance. It's a very uncomfortable feeling. And the problem with Abrahamic religion is they teach you this feeling is the devil. And it's a test. So when you feel that cognitive dissonance of, this isn't making sense, you're like, this is a test that I really just need to believe in this. And any opportunity you had at realization and critical thinking, poof. And now you're a good Christian. The whole beginning of the book, the apple that Eve eats is from the tree of knowledge. God says, don't eat that knowledge. You can't handle it. That's the whole premise, is be dumb so we can indoctrinate you with shit that doesn't make sense. I really encourage everybody to read the Bible. Even if you're not religious, read that shit from the beginning and see the chokehold it has on society. But especially people who grew up religious and have always grown up hearing these stories and reading from the Bible and reading passages, read that shit from the beginning. An OG translation, meaning one that does not remove all the violence and the fucked up language, not a pretty cute kid's Bible or a nice version, and not a study Bible. Because a lot of people who grew up studying religion in school, Christian universities, so many denominations of Abrahamic religions have study Bibles, meaning you read a passage from the Bible, and then you're like, what the fuck does that mean? That doesn't really make sense. And you feel uncomfortable because you're confused and you're like, that's kind of fucked up. And then rather than taking that opportunity to use critical thinking and change your mind and form your own opinion, you can just relieve that discomfort immediately by reading this text next to it that explains it in a way that does make sense and is not fucked up. And you're like, that's what that means. Okay, perfect. Let me move on to the next spot. No! That's why anytime you point out parts of the Bible that doesn't make sense to people, they'll have a great, beautiful explanation for you because they've trained their whole life to remove any sense of doubt by reading study Bibles that have an explanation right next to the passage so that you just constantly have on a loop. No, that part makes sense because of da-da-da-da-da-da. No. But you know what honestly bugs me more than people who believe the Bible's real? The people who don't, but still believe in Abrahamic religion. They're like, no, those stories are just figurative. They're evil. I don't care if you don't think they're real. If you think those are just supposed to be moral messages, they're horrible moral messages. That's almost worse to me. Like, so many people just are like, oh yeah, of course I believe in God and like Abrahamic religion, because that was just what's been like forced on you and surrounded by you your entire life. I can never fully connect with someone like that. That's why I always thought it was from the future. What do you mean you've all been believing this for thousands? I'm not from here. Like, I am literally from the year 10,000 and someone is playing a prank on me